based questions that are asked in RCs. Okay, so you start off by focusing on those, and then once you have fixed that, then the second step that you take is that you move towards critical reasoning. Right? Why? Because you fixed comprehension. So fact-based questions in RC are anyway easy. You fixed comprehension, so comprehension-based questions are going to be easy. So the third port of call is now answering the reasoning-based questions, making them easy. And in order to do that, you of course need to focus on CR. And when you focus on CR, when you focus on critical reasoning, the very first thing that we get into, why is my stream not starting? Let me just check. So the very first thing that we get into is learning to identify the assumption, because this is the bedrock for quite a few other question types. So you want to become good at strengthening the argument questions, weakening the argument questions, identifying flaws, all based on assumptions, and for that matter, even inferences. When we get an answer wrong, when we label, let us say, a conclusion which was can't say as true, it is because we have gone on to assume something which was not provided by the passage. So here we are working on this particular question type that a lot of you told me you want more practice on, and here I am, and I thought that okay, I'll just go ahead, start spending more time with you guys, practice more and more questions. So quick review first. What exactly is an assumption? An assumption is an unstated premise. Those of you who have not been in the classes with me, we have something called an argument. An argument consists of what? A conclusion. And this conclusion is supported by some premises. The everyday word for a premise is reason or basis. Right? So that's the everyday word. Now, there are times when we leave some of our premises unstated. So there are times when the author uses a premise, uses a reason in order to arrive at a conclusion, but then you leave it unstated. For instance, you know, some 9 months from now, you are going to be in a room, sitting on a chair. Across the table will be somebody from the IIMs interviewing you, right? And then they ask you, why do you want to do an MBA? Now, I know it, you know it, actually, even they know it. One of the major reasons behind this is to increase your employability, you know, money. But do we mention this when they ask us why MBA? We leave that part unstated. We don't state such things aloud usually. And when we leave some of our premises unstated, we start calling them assumptions. Right? So you and I, we are human beings, right? And then suddenly there is a human being who acquires the power to become invisible. We call him Mr. India. In case you watched that movie, very old reference. I don't know how many of you would even understand that. So that's what an assumption is. So I'm going to take you through some questions. Let's go ahead, starting with the first one. Drop your answers in the chat. You have a full 2 minutes. And if you need more, please take more. Answers, guys, answers. Where are the answers? I'm looking at the chat and I see nada, nothing there at the moment. But that's okay. It is the first one. Drop it in. So let me take you through the process, right? So we are given an argument and we are being asked to identify the assumption inherent in that argument. So when we are asked to identify assumptions, the first thing that we do after interpreting the paragraph is deconstructing the argument, analyzing the argument. And by analyzing, we mean that we go ahead and figure out the conclusion and the premises. So what exactly, so let's read it. Let's just begin by interpreting or understanding it. Okay. So bank depositors in India are all financially protected against bank failure because the government insures all individuals' bank deposits. So you notice we have an argument here. How do I know I have an argument? Well, because is a premise indicator. Whatever is stated after because is obviously going to be a premise. And since it supports bank depositors in India are all financially protected, that part automatically becomes our conclusion. So I'll just highlight it. Okay, let's read it further. An economist argues that this insurance is partly responsible for the high rate of bank failures since, now once again you notice since is another premise indicator. Whatever we write after since is what? A reason. So if this is the reason, if this is a premise, which statement does it support? It supports this. This insurance is partly responsible for the high rate of bank failures. So that's also a conclusion. Since it removes from depositors any financial incentive to find out whether the bank that holds their money is secure against failure. Now see, we have all sorts of banks, and over the last decade you must have heard news of these scenarios, these situations where a couple of banks became bankrupt and people who deposited money there, cooperative banks, some cooperative banks, not all of them of course, some of them were being poorly run. So people lost the money. Now the argument says that, hey, in India government secures you, insures you. If you've deposited money in a bank, even if the bank goes out of business, the government will give you your money. Now as a result, this economist says we have this scenario where people have no incentive to check whether the bank that they are depositing the money into is a soundly run, well-run bank or not. Well, the only thing that they'd look at is now interest rate or some other convenience. This is a bank which is close to my house. This is a bank which is giving me 1% extra on my fixed deposit. So you would not worry, because no matter how well run or poorly run the institution is, the government has your back. Okay. So this is partly responsible for the high rate of bank failures. There can be other reasons, but this is one of those reasons. And then it goes on to elaborate, if depositors were more selective, then banks would need to be secure in order to compete for depositors' money. So banks need to run themselves well. So basically, if depositors become choosy, if depositors look for well-run banks, then banks will be forced to run themselves in a fiscally responsible manner. But that's not the case. Customers don't look for it. And that is one of the reasons why banks fail. Now, there are two conclusions. So basically, it means that there are two arguments here, roughly put. Argument 1 and argument 2. Now, if you look at the question is asking us for the assumption that is involved in the Economist's argument, which means that we are looking at argument 2, we are not looking at argument 1. The answers that I have gotten are B and C. Nobody chose A, so I am skipping it. Let's start with B. So how do we figure out an assumption? So my first test is assumption is unstated premise. So it should give us something that strengthens the argument. If it does not strengthen the argument, it definitely cannot be an assumption. Now, does that mean that every answer choice that strengthens is an assumption? No. But that's our first pass. So let's start with B. A significant proportion of depositors maintain accounts at several different banks. Okay. So does that tell you that so these several different banks, does it strengthen the argument? Our first pass. Does it support the conclusion? What if I have accounts in 3 different banks and all of them are poorly run? Am I being selective then? This will strengthen only when you know that the reason behind this, having accounts at several different banks, the reason behind this is fiscal prudence. If the reason behind this is customer is hedging his bets, that I don't know whether a bank is good or not, so I'll just go ahead and deposit it at different banks so that if one bank goes out of business, and if that kind of thinking leads to it, then it strengthens, otherwise not, but it is not contained in it. So since this does not support the argument, you can actually remove it. Okay. Kusu HY 4HY, high for high. I think you joined in a little late. If you look at the first, I think if you look at minute 3 to minute 5, we actually spent some time talking about it. So you can go back to that and then refer. C, the more a depositor has to deposit, the more careful he or she tends to be in selecting a bank. Okay, now tell me, according to the argument presented by the Economist, are customers acting in a careful manner when they deposit money in a bank? No. Why? Because they do not have any financial incentive to find it out whether the bank is being run carefully or not. Yes, even if it is run poorly and it goes out of business, their money is safe, right? Government insures. So the argument says customers are not careful. Your answer says customers tend to become more careful in certain scenarios. So can I say that this contradicts our premise? This goes against our premise? And anything that contradicts your argument, can that act as an assumption? Mind you, assumption is a support. It is not a weakening agent. So since it contradicts your argument, can't be the assumption. Let's look at D. Potential depositors are able to determine which banks are secure against failure. Now see, when the author says, yeah, depositors have no financial incentive to figure out whether a bank is safe or not. And that is one of the reasons behind the failure of the banks. Isn't he assuming that a customer has the ability to do it? It is just that the customer chooses not to exercise it. These such assumptions are called very fundamental, very foundational assumptions. For instance, one fine day, if I look at you and say something like, hey, why don't you go to the market and get some sugar? Why don't you go to the market and get some sugar? Now, when I say this to you, when I instruct you to do this, there are certain underlying assumptions. I believe that you know where the market is and that you are capable of going to the market, that you are capable of purchasing sugar, and that the market is open on that particular day. I believe all those things when I ask you or request you to go to the market and get me some sugar. Very foundational. Negate any of those. If I believe that you are not capable of going to the market, will I ask you to go to the market and get some sugar? If I believe that the market is closed, will I ask you to go to the market and get me some sugar? Similarly, when the Economist here says your customers have no financial incentive to evaluate whether a bank is good or not, since their money is insured by the government, it acts as a reason for, or one of the reasons for, the failure of the banks. So when he says customer does not have any financial incentives, we believe that they have the ability. They choose not to exercise it. And how do we, when we are not very sure, how do we figure out whether an answer is an assumption or not? We negate that answer. Remember, assumption presents a new information, a new piece of information, which is necessary in order to arrive at the conclusion. If I negate this, if I say that potential depositors cannot determine whether a bank is secure against failure or not, then the Economist argument falls apart. They don't even have the ability. So even if you give them a financial incentive, they will still not be able to do it. So D, as a result, is something that gives you a necessary piece of information for the conclusion, and that is why the correct answer here is option D. Let's go ahead and attack the next question. Hopefully, now that you know the process, now that you know how precisely we think, and in case you skipped the class, you know some other things too about the assumptions. Hopefully that should help. Here is the next one. Let me start the timer. All right, so let's see where we stand with respect to this question. Answers, guys, answers. Okay, so a lot of B's with an occasional C. So mostly B. So A and D are definitely not in, and you guys are spot on when it comes to A and D. They're definitely not an answer. So B versus C. Let us check. We are looking for an assumption in the farmer's argument. Let's start. Worldwide, just 3 grain crops, rice, wheat, corn, account for most human caloric intake. So if you look at the calories that we consume in a day, and you look at people around the world, you'd notice that 3 grain crops, rice, wheat and corn, they account for most of the caloric intake. To maintain this level of caloric intake and also keep pace with global population growth, yields per acre from each of these crops will have to increase at least 1.5% every year, given that the supply of cultivated land is diminishing. Therefore, the government should increase funding for research into new ways to improve yield. Very easy to identify the conclusion. It is marked rather conveniently with the help of this word called therefore. So, why should government increase funding? Because cultivated land is diminishing, and therefore we need to increase the yield per acre by 1.5% if we want to continue feeding people rice, wheat and corn. So therefore government must do something. So here the assumption is government can do something, or government's intervention is important, or another assumption is that at least 1.5% growth in yield per acre every year should be sufficient to offset the loss of supply caused by diminishing cultivated land, the reduction in the cultivated land. Okay. So let's look at B. Increasing government funding for research into new ways to improve the yields per acre of rice, wheat and corn crops would help to increase total worldwide annual production of food from these crops. So we want to increase the yield per acre, we want to increase the availability of the grain, and we believe that therefore government should invest in research. Our assumption is government research can help us achieve that aim. So B is definitely true. If you negate it, if you say that government funding would not help, then is this conclusion possible? So if government funding is not going to help you, will you ask for, now does it make sense to ask for the government funding? No. Let's look at C. Increasing the yields per acre of rice, wheat and corn is more important than increasing the yields per acre of other crops. Let's negate it. Let's say it is not more important. So when you say it is not more important, what does it mean? That it can be equally important or less important. So irrespective of whether it is equally important as compared to other crops or less important, this argument still stands. There is this one perspective, human caloric intake, that we need to ensure. That makes them important. Whether they are more important or not as compared to other crops will not be relevant here. So even when we take C out of the equation, our argument still stands, and that tells us that C is not necessary, but B is. Kusu. Okay. So do we need to note down something from the question that can help us? Absolutely yes. Okay. Once again, this is a practice session, so I'm not really getting into hardcore basics. You can go watch the lectures for that if you want to, but it is important for you to, number one, understand the paragraph. Please always, when it comes to critical reasoning, when it comes to verbal ability questions, the first thing that you consistently need to check is, have I achieved a reasonable degree of comfort in comprehension or not? Because if you haven't and you continue hammering at these questions, that strategy won't work. You're missing out on a very important prerequisite. So please start there. After that, yes, when you come here, you need to figure out the conclusion and the premises. Then, of course, the approach where we try to figure out whether the given information is necessary for this conclusion or not. And you can do that by going through the theory of assumption. Maybe after this session, you can Google identify the assumption questions or theory, etc. on YouTube. Watch a video or two. If you have some doubts, you can reach out to me in my group and then we can talk. Neeru, thanks a lot. Yep, absolutely. So elimination, jotting things down. Is there a trick? Yes. You notice this note that I've added strategically. So we know that an assumption is supposed to be necessary for the conclusion. Now imagine if I tell you that 3 was multiplied by something and the answer was 21. So you know that there has to be 7 here. Without 7 you can't reach here, right? So that unstated part is your assumption. Now if I tell you that, dude, the number here is not 7, then can we ever get 21 as an answer? No. So if I don't put 7 here, I can't get this answer. So that tells me 7 is necessary. Similarly, if I don't put B here in this argument, I will not be able to get this answer. So when we end up making a mistake in these reasoning based questions in RCs, assumption questions in RCs, it could be because we don't know what an assumption is, or maybe we don't know the right process. But then I've covered it thoroughly. I think there are quite a few people here. Ashish says, any trick to save time in exam? Negation plus work on increasing your reading speed and your comprehension. Okay. Acha, Neeru is Anjali. Arey, whose ID are we using here? Huh? Okay. Here is the next one. Give it a shot and then we'll see how it goes. Oh wow, Bridge, that was quick. Atharv, really very quick. Huh? Under a minute, huh? Ritu, Neeru, Ipsita. I mean, amazing time in this one, guys. Acha, sorry, Neeru is Anjali, so yeah. Atharv is traveling to Mumbai and you're also attending my session. That's fantastic, man. You are so dedicated. I just wish I had a little more of your tenacity and that hunger. When, in case you are ever, if you ever find yourself around Delhi, do reach out, do hit me up. I'd love to catch up with you in person. Varsha, okay. Priyadarshini too. Okay, so I think a large chunk of us have responded and you guys have also responded correctly. D is indeed the right answer. In case you happen to have any confusion, any doubt, please ask me and I'll go ahead and answer. So let's just review it quickly. Explanation offered above for the low esteem held by research scientists assumes that. So generally, scientists enter their field with the goal of doing important new research and accept as their colleagues those with similar motivation. Therefore, when any scientist wins renown as an expounder of science to general audiences. So, if there is a scientist who becomes popular for how he goes on to explain science to general people, other scientists, most other scientists conclude that this popularizer should no longer be regarded as a true colleague. So, they basically, so you need to have a property X, you need to have property X in order to be termed as a true colleague, right? Now, if somebody becomes a popularizer, he is not worthy of being a true colleague. So basically what we are saying is that if you are a popularizer, you do not have property X, and that is exactly what is given in D. Let's go ahead, let's Kusu. Since I don't know your name, that's how I'd be forced to address you. Let's look at B. Research scientists tend not to regard as colleagues those scientists whose renown they envy. This envy is irrelevant because now they win renown as an expounder of science. They are popularizers. Now, do they stop regarding them as true colleagues because they are jealous of them or envious of them? Here is a homework for you. Give me the difference between envy and jealousy. Very subtle, huh? But do think over it. So, is that the reason? No. It's just that they no longer think of them as people who do important new research. And that is why even if you negate B, this conclusion still stands, and thus we can rule out option B. And don't worry, do not get disheartened. It is from the chat, I could see that it is day 1 for you when it comes to assumptions. It's a very challenging question type. A lot of people take, almost going through almost 100 odd questions before they feel rock solid. So you're soldiering on, and that's something that is lovely to see. But let's stop here today. Okay, and I'll leave you with a way of reaching out to me. Here is a Telegram group in case you are new. Kusu, always. The options are always going to be tricky, no? So you can reach out to me using this particular Telegram group. In fact, there are a couple of other questions that I had planned. I'd probably sit down with you guys in the group tomorrow and take you through those, along with talking about another couple of important things. So stay tuned. And before I sign out, to think is easy, to act is difficult, and to act as one thinks is the most difficult of all. Very easy to think. I want to get into an IIM. To act is difficult. To take action so that you can get into an IIM, well, that's difficult. But then to act as one thinks is the most difficult of all. So just acting, just taking action is difficult. Taking action which is consistent with your thinking, well, that's the most challenging. So you know that when you are able to show up for your preparation every day, you are actually taking care of the most difficult of them all pieces of work. So keep it up, and I'm sure we will do well. Varsha, can we take it up? Which creates a barrier? Well, Varsha, just learn to ignore those. Yeah, they are artificial labels which at times the creators apply. There is a reason behind why we have started doing that. We did not do it until last year, but let's take it up in the group. We can talk about this here. Hi Ritu, you are making the life of others easy, huh? Good. Okay, then that's it from me. I'll see you in the next session next Wednesday, 9 p.m., where you and I will practice an RC passage. I've started working on that RC passage today. I've selected the article from which the passage will be created. It is going to be based on science, venturing into neuroscience, and the questions that I'll create are going to be as confusing as the CAT questions. So do join me, and we'll have great fun next Wednesday as well. All right then, have a great evening ahead, and I'll catch you guys later. Thank you.